Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. If your sales team are fearful, reserved or nervous when it comes to closing a sale, perhaps the pitch isn't working. With decades in business, Poulos has crafted a sales pitch he calls the Punch Perfect Pitch. Glenn is Executive Vice President and General Manager of NWS, a provider of technology and infrastructure solutions based in North America, where he's responsible for sales, marketing and customer service. And he knows the Punch Perfect Pitch works. First, Glenn insists you've got to get in front of the customer. Selling from behind a computer screen isn't going to cut it. Glenn's talking to Chris Ashmore.
My experience, I've always sold products which require the customer to evaluate them, trial them. And so face-to-face is really important from the world that I come from and where my sort of rationale about selling. So I'm always pushing people, just get in front of the customer, right?
Absolutely. Well, there's a bit of an art form to sales, and one part of that art form is the sales pitch. What are some mistakes do you see people make with the sales pitch?
Well, these are all the things I go over all the time, right, with people. So, and a sort of shameless little plug, on my website, I have right across the top, there's a banner you can push for the perfect pitch, and it's called the Punch Perfect Pitch and Close. And the reason why most pitches can fail or go awry is because they're awful and people did a crappy job at them. And so in order for a pitch to go well, it needs to be a good pitch, properly constructed. And, I developed this technique a long time ago where I call it the Punch Perfect Pitch and Close. Mine is a process for creating a 3 parts to the pitch so that you're not doing a typical, what I consider be boring pitch all the time. And so I break it down into the punch, the perfect pitch, and then the close, right? And the part that's usually different in it is the punch part, right? And that's where a lot of people will start by going straight into their pitch and, they'll fire up the PowerPoint. They've gotten, 3 or 4 important people sitting around and they're like, okay, well, let me show you, this is our factory in Sweden and we've got 1,200 people and we've got offices in Tokyo, Italy, and United States. And I'm already asleep, right? I'm already done, right? Nobody cares where your factories are. And so what I say is start with something either like a change of state where allowed sound, or typically nowadays the best thing is to show them a video. Go straight into a video, short, sweet, but that sort of shows your product or service doing exactly the benefit that they want to achieve. So you have to do your homework, right? What is it they need to achieve with the particular thing that you're selling, and just show us an amazing clip of that will help to change their emotional state. And they're like, yeah, that's what we need. And that's the very first thing you want them to see. And then you go into the pitch, which is basically, I use the Goldilocks principle of, good, better, best, small, medium, large, or whatever, where it's always in power of 3, right? And you break it down into 3 sections, and you always start by telling them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And everything is always using the power of 3. And I do talk about that, power of 3, a lot in my book. And at the end, after you've done the perfect pitch, which is using the power of 3, you close them. And a successful close is when you stop talking, they ask you how much it costs. Because if you've done it properly, you don't have to ask them. They're asking you, how much does it cost? I want to know, tell me now, because you've done the right thing. And if you haven't gotten to them that state, you probably messed up somewhere along the way.
Right. Maybe a stupid question, but how long does this pitch presentation go for? I suppose it depends.
It does depend, but usually not that long. If you're dealing with the decision makers and what have you, you probably have them for no more than a half an hour. And so, this thing would be, I'm talking sub half an hour. You have a succinct punch at the beginning, show them what it's doing, break it down into 3 succinct sections, and then close, and really it shouldn't take more than half an hour. And if it is, you're probably talking too much. and boring them. And then, you may be there for longer than half an hour. There may be questions and objections and things for you to handle or whatever, but the presentation part should be short and sweet.
That sounds great. If they're not convinced, if they're not reaching for their wallet at the end, and if they have some objections or whatever, is there a way to handle those objections?
Well, there can be, but a lot of times there's not a real trick to handling a valid objection because you've probably either not done your homework or lack of preparation or, your presentation wasn't good or what have you. I mean, like, for instance, if they're going to start by saying, oh, well, it's too expensive and things like that, then yes, there are different techniques and what have you. But oftentimes when I suggest, you don't get to the presentation until you've done all the other things correctly, like figure out who is involved in the process, who needs to be there when you're there. And honestly, if you're not even in a situation where you think you're viable to get the business, you shouldn't even be doing a presentation, right? So a lot of the pre-qualification, so let's say, they sell things, some people sell it for 20K, some people sell it for 50K, and some systems are 100K, right? And let's say you're the 100K systems. Well, before you're going to go and waste an hour of your time and time driving there, coming back and whatever, you need to know that that's the category they want to be in. Right? Like if they're a 20K solution system company, you should be moving to the next deal and let the 20K providers do their presentation. You're not going to talk them up from 20 to 100. So much of it depends on the pre-qualification and things like that, right? I mean, if people are not sold on the product during the presentation as well, oftentimes you sometimes maybe need to take a step back and take a different approach. Like, for instance, you guys don't seem convinced. A lot of times customers really see the value by doing a 3-day trial. So can we set up a unit in your building? When can we do it? And then I have all sorts of rules that I follow about dropping the units off. A lot of people are like, okay, and then they ship a demo in, and then a week later they forgot it was there. And they're like, oh yeah, I got to get that box back. One of my rules is, pardon the expletive, but never fax the facts and never ship the shit. Right? And so always hand deliver everything wherever possible. And so if you're going to do a $100,000 system demo or whatever, you're going to drop it off and set it up for them. You're going to make sure, all right, who's going to be pushing the buttons? Who's going to be driving the thing? Who's going to be evaluating the software? Who's going to be, you want to know all that and you want to go see them and talk to them. And then you want to make sure that it's set up and working properly so they can use it. And when you leave, and then the next day, you want to be calling and following up. And before you left from the first day of setting it up, you want to tell them, hey, this thing's in really high demand. I got to come back and pick it up on Thursday, right? And, only give them a very small amount of time. I usually say, figure out how long they need it for and divide that by 2. Because once they get a sense that they need it, then they're like, the last thing you want them to do is, oh, I need it for another week. And then all of a sudden they've done their job and they just want to send it back, right? It's like wearing a dress and keeping the tags on. So try to prevent that by only providing very short cycles. So those are some of the tricks and techniques I use to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff and make sure people are making proper use of the resources, because it's expensive to do demos and presentations. And you want to make sure you're demonstrating to a receptive audience that's prepared and ready to make purchases and the like, and that you're in the proper part of the food chain for their needs and wants.
That was Glenn Poulos, Executive Vice President and General Manager of NWS. You can download Glenn's Punch Perfect Pitch Guide at the link in the show notes of this episode. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.